everybody. This is Ebru Köksal. I'm Chair of Women in Football, and welcome to another one of our webinar series. As you know, since the pandemic began, we tried to reach out to our membership base and, organize all these wonderful chats and roundtables, which has been very beneficial for everybody. And today I am really, really proud to introduce a great friend of mine. We've known each other, Sule, for 41 years. We went to school together, and she's a wonderful...
Has it been that long, Ebru?
Unfortunately, yeah, kindergarten, right? We don't want to say high school or middle school. Kindergarten. So she's got a very amazing CV. In case you have not seen it, she is a leadership coach, consultant, facilitator, and keynote speaker. She has more than 25 years of experience in business strategy, organizational management, and leadership development. And one of her main topics is about resilience, purpose, and neurocreativity. And she's a graduate of Columbia University's master's level coaching program, a certified Gestalt coach and resilience at work, and NBI practitioner. And Sarah will share her TEDx Berlin talk for anyone who is interested in hearing more about her work and her story. So I'll allow Sule Kutlay Gandur to get started, and we have a little surprise somewhere in the middle of the discussion. I'll come back online and we'll do a little interview with her.
Thank you, Ebru. Thank you very much. I'll try to live up to that introduction. Thank you, everyone. It's my pleasure and honor to be with you today. I have some slides, so I'll start sharing them with you. Today, we're going to talk about resilience, the hot topic during the COVID days. Funnily enough, I came across resilience about 5 or 6 years ago now in a therapy session. I walked into my therapist's office for the first time. I sat down. I was quite miserable at the time, and I started talking about how depressed and unhappy I was. The therapist listened to me patiently, of course, and he said, before we go any further, I'd like to suggest a book to accompany our therapy sessions. And the book is right here. I'd like to show it to you. It's called The Happiness Trap. It talks about the basic principle of acceptance and commitment therapy as well, and this incredible expectation from all of us to be happy all the time, and how unrealistic that is. The book advises us to go after meaning, the happy together with the unhappy moments, making life meaningful. So that's the first time I came across resilience. And since then, I've been reading about resilience. I've been trying to develop my own resilience. And I share my expertise on resilience with leaders around the world, just like you. By the time we came together today, it is December 2nd, 2020 today, I'm sure each one of you have had your own share of crisis. And for the past 8 months now, we have been going through a collective crisis together, a medical one, a psychological one, an economic one that is deepening by the day. What we find most difficult in this crisis is risk versus uncertainty. It's the amount of uncertainty and ambiguity we're facing. We simply cannot calculate the distribution of risk this time, unlike many other crises before. And when this happens, the human brain cannot adapt well. We're not equipped to deal with so much uncertainty. The amygdala, which is the little part of our brains at the bottom that is responsible for the fight and flight mechanism, gets hijacked. So it's constantly hyperactive now. That's why we may be fearful, anxious, angry even, more than at other times. Let me tell you about a simple experiment on this. They tell people you're in your car and you are going to a meeting. the traffic gets stuck all of a sudden. This happens everywhere in London, Istanbul, LA, in many other cities. So it happens again. But it's so bad, and you didn't foresee this coming in the GPS. And option A is, you know that there is no way you're going to make it to this meeting. Option B, there is a 50-50% chance. You just may make it, you may not make it. Which option would you prefer? They ask people. Please answer to yourselves. I cannot hear you at the moment, but most people, if not all, answer A. They'd rather know that they will not make it than not knowing, because knowing of a negative consequence is much easier to deal with. It's less stressful than not knowing at all, the uncertainty. So what to do, how to cope, and that is what we're going to talk about today through resilience. And I will be defining resilience together with you, touching on some scientific facts and research on resilience, taking a quick poll, a snapshot of our resilience, talk about the pillars of resilience, and share with you a tool to reframe crisis with more resilience, and finish off with takeaways. As we get started, would you mind typing in the chat? What's the first word that comes with resilience? And Sarah is going to help me summarize that, or hear that and see that, because when I look at my slides, I cannot see the chat, unfortunately. So Sarah, what words, what concepts, what ideas are coming through in relation to resilience?
Robust, healthcare, perseverance, adaptability, strength.
Yes.
Strength. That's an overwhelming theme. Bouncing back from adversity.
Resilience, thank you very much, Sarah. Resilience is all of these and more. Resilience is bouncing back, but it's not just that, because it's not only about survival, but it's also about growth, changing with change and learning from it. It is being adaptable to different situations, of course, including a crisis. So adaptability and flexibility is a big part of it. Strength, and that is the endurance bit, and you are very right, it is extremely important. And perseverance, the grit to go forward despite challenges. I find that the simplest definition of resilience comes through an analogy of the bamboo tree. Bamboo is an interesting plant. It grows across all continents and climates almost around the world. You have it, I have it in my backyard. It grows about 9 centimeters per day, so it easily thrives. It can take a lot of rain, or it can take a lot of sunshine, even drought. But most interestingly, the tensile strength of the bamboo tree is greater than of steel. I couldn't believe this at first. So you can bend a bamboo all you like, but you simply cannot break it. That's why we use it as building material as well in earthquake zones. Engineers do that. So when we talk about being resilient, what we mean is being as flexible and therefore enduring, strong as a bamboo tree. American Psychological Association defines it as your personal adaptability against trauma and threat. Harvard Business School defines it as, by far my favorite definition. Resilience is having that courage that comes from your mind and from your heart to look into your own abyss. So when you come to the edge like this, like in the picture, you may feel dizzy, you may feel scared, but resilience is having the courage to look back at your own reality right in the eye. And this takes realism. It also takes optimism. Realistic optimism is something we talk a lot about when we talk about resilience, in reference to resilience. And although they may seem as at the opposite ends of the spectrum, there's a way to bring them together. Viktor Frankl was the first social scientist that talked about resilience and tragic optimism in his words. Frankl was a professor, a neurologist, and a professor of medicine. at Vienna University when Hitler's army entered Austria. And of course, unfortunately, he was sent to concentration camps. He lost all his family members, but miraculously, he managed to survive. And upon survival, he wrote a book called Men's Search for Meaning. In it, he talks about the times when he was most broken, most desperate at the camps. He would start imagining reuniting with his students and telling them if and when he survives about his experiences and what he learned from it. And this he calls tragic optimism, being able to find meaning in life despite and because of the tragedy you're going through. And he says, when we can no longer change a situation, we're challenged to change ourselves. The second scientist I'd like to mention is Aaron Antonovsky. He again talks about realistic optimism, but from a different angle. Aaron Antonovsky did a lot of work on the relationship between stress and health. And he was looking at the effects of menopause on women's health, when he came across a very interesting finding. Some of the women in his research group turned out to be women who had been through a concentration camp experience, but they were just as healthy as their counterparts. Naturally, Antonovsky was really surprised, so he double and triple checked his findings again to arrive at the same result. And this led him to ask the question, if disease and stress and tragedy occur everywhere all the time, how do we survive and stay healthy despite the odds? And his answer came in the form of a theory, salutogenesis theory. According to Antonovsky, to be healthy and resilient physically and mentally means having a sense of coherence. And this comes from three things. First, understanding your reality and your circumstances really well. That is being realistic. Second, managing your circumstances really well by using the resources available to you. That is being resourceful. And finally, making a meaning out of the good together with the bad through realistic optimism. And how to do that, and why some people do that better than others or more quickly than others. This debate still continues to a certain extent to date. Is resilience in our genes? Is it in our nature? Or is it more development? Is it in our nurture? And Emmy Werner answered this question for the first time around 1970s. She's a developmental psychologist, and she went to the island of Kauai in Hawaii, and she followed the lives of 698 children from birth until middle age. It was an incredible ethnopsychographic study that took many years. And she simply asked, is resilience from nature or nurture? Some of these children were born into quite difficult circumstances. There was divorce, poverty, drug and alcohol abuse in the family. Others were born into more agreeable circumstances. She saw in the end, it did not matter what these children were born into. 1/3, regardless, developed into resilient adults. And these 1/3 that became resilient adults shared 4 common factors growing up. She calls them protective factors. The first one is they had learned to problem solve. They didn't run to anybody necessarily. They could stand on their 2 feet and solve problems on their own. Second, they had role models growing up. They had an aunt, an uncle, a teacher that was close to their heart, that they could share their questions and secrets with. 3, they had a sense of helping the community. They worked in the church, they fed the poor, they helped street animals, so on and so forth. And finally, they had good communication skills. They had friends and they kept their friends through the years. I think these protective factors are worth thinking about because they shed light on how we can encourage resilience in our teams, as well as how we can implant resilience and role model it in our children. But we will come back to that later. Now, the question is, I'm sure you're telling me, yeah, we've heard all this before. Good and great, Sule, but how? How is the question? How am I going to be more resilient tomorrow? And before we move into that, into some tips, I would like to take a quick snapshot of our resilience level at the moment. And Sarah just popped a poll. There are 5 statements here. I face reality even when it's difficult. I ask for help when I need it. I can be flexible and adapt to change. I'm proactive in addressing challenges, and I'm hopeful about the future. Can you please describe, not describe, pick the one that describes you best in times of crisis. And Sarah can help me out to see the results.
Just a few more seconds.
Yes. Try to pick the top one. All right, how are we doing? Great. So you find it as a group facing reality even when it's difficult, easy. The second height is flexibility and adaptability when a drastic change happens. The third one is asking for help, and then it's proactivity, and then it's hope. And I see that hope is the lowest. Thank you very much for this. To unlock, sorry about that, to unlock to unlock the realism, to unlock resourcefulness, to unlock flexibility or proactivity and hope, there are certain things you can do and certain questions you can ask, of course. But and to tap into your resilience stock, there is a personal resilience survey, professional resilience assessments that I use that go a lot more in detail, of course. But in the interest of time, I just put this up because these 5 questions or statements refer to the pillars of resilience, of realism, resourcefulness, flexibility, proactivity, and realistic optimism. And here are the questions I was looking for. You can ask yourself, what is my honest reality? Who can help me with that? What new possibilities do I see? What can I plan and prepare for? And what gives me a sense of hope or faith? Now, I believe that who you are determines how you lead. So it doesn't matter if we're talking about the resilience of a person, a leader, or an organization. The principles are one and the same. And since we are mostly a professional crowd with different career and jobs at the moment, I wanted to go through these principles with some work examples in mind. So the first question to ask is, what is in my power to change? Realism through acceptance. Here I'd like to talk about James Stockdale. James Stockdale was an admiral in the US Army, and he was a prisoner of war also, in Vietnam for 7 years. And he tells us, unlike popular belief, it wasn't the optimists who survived Vietnam. It was the realists, even the pessimists. The optimists, because they thought they would be saved in 2 weeks and reunite with their families by Christmas, died of broken hearts. The realists, on the other hand, who knew that they would be there for months and years, hungry and tortured, actually made it through. And this is known as able to face this brutal reality, but at the same time, sense that hope or see the light at the end of the tunnel to be able to make it through a drastic crisis. What can I plan and prepare for is the next question. So preparation through proactivity. I think looking at all the countries around the world, Germany did a pretty good job in terms of proactivity. Of course, Ms. Merkel, being a scientist herself, was very good in informing her people, being transparent about the facts, taking precautions and measures in time, and being calm and collected in this crisis. But there's another example, a timeless example, and that is Morgan Stanley in 9/11. Morgan Stanley at the time, 10 years before 9/11, woke up to the fact that the Twin Towers were a potential threat for terrorism. So they immediately took proactive measures. They hired a VP in charge of security. They placed backup servers all around the world, and they started doing evacuation emergency drills throughout the years. So when the actual terrible event happened and the first plane hit the first tower, Morgan Stanley started evacuating immediately. And when the second plane hit, Morgan Stanley offices were almost all empty. They lost a record low 7 out of 2,700 people. So proactivity through preparation. And then flexibility through improvisation. What new possibilities do you see? We're not talking about not having a discipline or routines in place. We're talking about seeing new connections and possibilities quickly. Alcoholic beverage companies are a good example. Immediately, they started producing hand sanitizers from the alcohol they make. Car manufacturers started making ventilators. Arçelik, a Turkish white goods manufacturer, started making ventilators quite early in the process. This I found quite creative. I came across this the other day because they mailed me, because I like wine. And Carignan is wine house in England somewhere, and they sent their customers a message, keep calm and Carignan, and they invited them to the first drive-in tasting. They said, please do come over on Saturday, anytime from 11 until 2, download our app, take a very short drive around the block. When you arrive, our people dressed very safely at a safe distance will give you your plastic throwaway tasting glasses. Drive around the block as you listen to our Spotify songs and taste your wine. And a person, again, dressed very safely at a safe distance will come, open your trunk, put it in your trunk, and you can drive away replenished with wine for Christmas. So brilliant and quite flexible improvisation here. And finally, where is the hope? The toughest question to answer. I find that Bill Gates is a good example of a leader of being realistic but optimistic at the same time. He's a philanthropist at heart. He has fought infectious diseases through his efforts and foundation. He's also fighting with his efforts COVID and finding a cure for it, for that cause. He remains realistic yet optimistic. He says we will lose a lot of people, but we will still lose less number of people than we did to smallpox, and the vaccine is eventually, and even today we got some news for England, is on the way. So Harvard Business School says leadership in crisis is about being brutally honest, rational, and hopeful. And I think this is also a good summary of resilience. Be realistic, brutally honest, and therefore rational, but keep the hope somehow. Now, the how, there is a little tool that I use, a practical one, that worked for me and works, I find, for other people when the crisis hits. It is about asking yourself 3 simple questions. First, you start with your context of change and ask yourself what's up, what is in your control, what is not. Then you review your content of your life with curious eyes and ask what matters to align priorities with resources. And finally, you move into conduct with courage, move into action and ask what's next. So what are your insights going forward? To put this in question form would be, what will you accept in this crisis? And what can you change? What will you change? Then moving on, what is the most important thing for you? And who can help you achieve that? And what is the one lesson you are in the process of taking away? Ebru, will you help me out in doing a demo? Unfortunately, we can't do breakouts. So maybe we can go over these questions together. Should I kill the slide so we see you more?
Sure.
You remember the questions, so.
Yes.
Okay. Perfect. So if you can think back on a crisis, it could be COVID, it could be another crisis that you have faced.
Okay, well, I'll go back 6 years.
What did you have
actually.
to accept? Okay. Oh, 6 years
Okay.
ago. You're going to
6
talk
years
about
ago.
a crisis from 6 years ago. What was the crisis? First, tell us about that.
Well, my brother's wife had her first baby back in September 2014. And as the proud aunt, I went and took lots of pictures, posted all of them on social media. And the next day I got a call from her frantically saying, take off all the pictures. And I didn't know what was going on. And she was just screaming, that's not my baby, that's not my baby. And I thought, okay, this is probably postpartum. She's just having a crisis. And it turned out that the hospital had mixed up the babies. And they gave the right baby to the right mother 24 hours later. So everything looked fine, though everybody was very shaken. But there was also something very wrong with her blood count, and she was just not in good health. And the hospital ran lots of tests for 3-4 days, couldn't find anything, and discharged her. And on the 7th day, she had a brain hemorrhage, went into a coma, and she was in a coma for 20 days, and she passed away even before my nephew was 1 month old. So this was the biggest crisis that I personally faced in my life. And it was really, really heartbreaking. And it wasn't something I knew how to deal with. And it first was about denial and looking for ways to get the guilt off. Like, how did we not notice? How come we didn't realize she had a congenital condition, which was actually leading her to bleed internally, but it could not be detected. So you just want to take the blame first, but then you accept that she's gone. And then maybe you ask the second question to me. So that is the situation, a very, very difficult one.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. It's a very difficult one, and being friends ourselves, I do remember those difficult times. Thank you for sharing this very, very difficult event in your life and crisis. So, how did you accept it, and then how did you move on to answering, what can I change? What is in my control to change?
I mean, when you have a helpless brother who was about to commit suicide, he was so much in love with his wife and not knowing what to do. My sister-in-law's parents were also in extremely bad shape. I looked around and saw that it was only I who could solve the crisis. I had to step up. And it was not an easy time work-wise in my life either. But I really tried to see what was important, which was definitely family and a newborn little boy, beautiful angel, who was going to face life without a mother. And there was something that I could do about it.
So your priority was your family and this little baby, and you could change your brother's, you could help your brother's depression, and you could change the fate of this baby. And so that gave you something that you could change, and that was your priority. So who helped you with that? Who helped you achieve this priority to take care of Mert?
Well, first of all, the solution that I had in mind had to be accepted by my immediate family, my own kids, who were teenagers at the time. One was 14, one was 15, and my husband of 20 years. And my solution was basically to bring in the baby as our third child, but also not leave my brother behind either, and ask him to move in with us. And with accepting this solution, it was not really possible to go ahead with it. So luckily, they all agreed, and they thought that it was, you know, a wonderful idea. So for the last 6 years, we've been one big family with 3 adults, 2 teenagers who now became adolescents themselves, and a beautiful 6-year-old boy, and 2 dogs, you know, and a big happy family.
Well, this is definitely a story of tragic optimism. And I'm so glad you got all this help from family, and I'm sure you got other help from other resources as well, in addition to that, like your friends, or I don't know, did you get any other help from anybody else in this tough situation?
I guess.
Who were your resources?
I mean, first of all, basically all our friends were extremely generous in their love and support. And they thought that this was a wonderful way to come out of a crisis, and that they that they could do anything and everything for us whenever we required help. And getting that outside support and approval is, I think, quite important. And changing our lifestyle to start all over again with a, you know, little baby. We all had our career ambitions and dreams. I was actually considering to move abroad for an international assignment. You know, I left all that aside, and the kids were happy to have another crying baby in the house. But also our friends, whenever, you know, we were traveling or that we were invited to a dinner, all of a sudden we were showing up with a 2-month-old baby, you know.
I remember that. Yes.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So you could
that
actually align your
support
priorities with your
Exactly.
resources, with the
Exactly.
outside support, as well as the support from the inside, the core family. What's the one lesson you walked away with from that, which may actually have helped you in this crisis as well?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Sule, you've known me all these years. I've been an extremely ambitious and high achieving person all my life. And I had this stupid belief maybe that I could control everything. All I had to do was really be on the lookout, that I could solve any kind of problem, and that fate would never do anything against me. But this made me realize that there are actually things that I cannot control in life. And I might be gone the next day, and another big title or a big promotion or being a very important person at work is not necessarily what counts. There are other ways of defining success and also leaving a legacy. And I toned down my ambitions in that front in the corporate world, but instead really started making a difference in the lives of other people, trying to help other women in their own personal growth journeys, and reaching out to others who had maybe similar tragedies in their lives. And today, what I'm doing together with Women in Football, I think is probably the most soul-filling and fulfilling activity in my 30-year career.
Thank you, Ebru. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's quite an inspiration for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you.
So this is a more detailed version of the resilience model, and you can get in touch with me later if you'd like to go into it deeper, really, because it's a more detailed model that I work with my clients on one-on-one or team settings. But moving on to and possibly to a certain extent from this one was the fact that there are things that can be beyond our control, and sometimes fate I'm summarizing or rephrasing in my own words, I hope it's correct, that fate transforms our lives in a good and meaningful way as well. So she has not only brought up her nephew in a wonderful way, but she's also helping other women transform their careers now, which would not have happened otherwise. I will be sharing my takeaway from my journey with resilience. And as I do that, I would like for you to please type in the chat your takeaway from this session and what we talked about. Now, there is the CEO of our brain, and the CEO of our brain is the prefrontal cortex. It's right behind our forehead. It's right here. And it's responsible for gathering information from the senses and putting us into meaningful action. So if we set goals and go for them and make plans, it's because of our prefrontal cortex. If we don't say everything that comes to our mind everywhere, it's because of the prefrontal cortex. And I call this ages and stages because we all go through it. We're born, we grow up, we become adolescents, start giving our parents hell. Our self-esteem develops, and so does our prefrontal cortex. Then around our 20s, our prefrontal cortex completes its maturation. We go into looking for the right partner, the right job and career, and we get busy with that. Around 30s, we may start getting married or start having children, and our emotional bodies are complete. And by the time we move into middle age, we start asking, what have I done? And what have I not done? So this is sort of a second adolescence for us. And according to the answers we give, this may become a breakdown or a breakthrough or both. And there is a transformation that happens. We may change partners, we may change jobs, we may change our lifestyles. And we go into our 50s with a new definition of who we are and a new definition of purpose and legacy, and start discovering new things. So what happens along this journey is this kid that I'm sure is going to enter this beach in South Africa, even though it says no dogs, no bicycles, no swimming, is quite carefree, curious, and courageous. They're very curious. They ask millions of creative questions, and they're quite courageous. They fall down, they get back up, and they go after things that they haven't been able to do, or they just don't know. And as we grow up, somehow we leave this child behind and push it in the shadows. As our prefrontal cortex takes over and we start making plans and start performing and succeeding and performing some more, this child is quieted down and starts standing in the corner. So to be more resilient these days, I'm asking you to please bring that child back into the limelight a little bit. And in the words of Ursula Guin, maturity is not an outgrowing, but a growing up. An adult is not a dead child, but a child who managed to survive. So Sarah, if you can help me with some takeaways that you see in the chat, so everybody can share it and I get to hear it, and then we can move into Q&A. And at this point, I will stop sharing my slides.
So we've got a takeaway from Alison Palmer that she says, there is always a way through adversity if you keep an open mind, listen to your instinct and ask for help.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, asking for help is key in resilience, because that's what makes us resourceful. Knowing who to ask, where to get the help effectively, efficiently, and quickly. And gut feeling is also a very good point, because there's something called gut feeling. I was reading about it the other day. There are some neurons in our brain that light up and make us take very quick decisions and form opinions in 20th of a second. and they are responsible for gut feeling. So gut feeling comes from here, but also from here, and you can certainly trust it in your resilience. Anything else you'd like to add, Sarah, before we move?
Yes, Chidam says, I've had a really tough year and I've had feedback that I may not be dealing with my emotions. Although I am confident that I am choosing actively to remain positive and proactive to make my dad and my family proud. So I particularly like the idea of tragic optimism, and I will read more into this. Thank you.
You are very welcome, Chidam. And yes, this is also a philosophy of life. It's not just something that we can learn to do overnight. So reading about it and thinking about it is certainly a good idea. You can start with Viktor Frankl's book if you haven't read it before. And I can make other suggestions as well to look into it. All right.
We've got a question from...
Yes.
From Nisha, Katie, do you have any daily affirmations or similar to help you refocus when needed?
Good question. I think different affirmations work for different people. For me, I can share mine. When I feel overwhelmed, I take 3 deep breaths by taking a short breath in and then take it out, or give the breath out as if I'm blowing a balloon. And I do this 3 to 5 times. And I tell myself, thou too shalt pass, like other things have passed. And then I tell myself, the other thing I remind myself, pause with a purpose. There is a purpose in your life. So just pause and start again. I don't know, this is a good idea. Sarah and Ebru or anybody else, by typing in the chat, would you like to share your affirmations?
Yeah, while we wait, we've got another takeaway from Kieran: to use the people around you to help you get through the tough times, and not to be afraid to ask for help and focus on what you can control. Yeah.
There's always something that is in your control that you can take responsibility for and act on. You just need to get out of the victim mode and move into that. And the quicker you do that, the better it is. Every day may not be a good day, but there's good in every day. Love that. Yes, certainly. Very true. Remind yourself of all you've achieved and overcome to give you renewed energy. I'm more than good enough. As I am is mine. The day will come and go like all the others. Yes, everything is transient, isn't it? Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other questions? Hello?
Not yet.
Ebru, do you have a question? Although you have listened to me many times.
I guess maybe, Sule, a few tips. You said that you also do corporate resilience analysis as well. Maybe just a few tips on how your personal resilience can be carried into your workplace and, especially in these crisis periods.
Yes, thank you. I think that's quite a good and challenging question. Let me open up the slides again, because there's something I would like to show there as well in relation to this question, of course. And let's see. Can you see my slides?
No, I think you just ended the slideshow. We need to reshare, I think.
Okay. Let's do that. Eventually, this is going to happen.
Yeah, it's back.
All right. Very good. So I told you already that there are different assessments that I use because I think to be more resilient, first you need to assess how resilient you are today. and look at your resiliency stock. When I look at professional resilience, working with professionals, there are 4 different aspects that we go through. The first one is, and the basic one, is about your health. And this is purely your physical health. Huh? Do you eat well? Do you sleep well? And do you move? Because if you're not enduring physically, you cannot be enduring in your mind. Then we look at flexibility. How adaptable is your thinking? How quickly can you change perspective? Then we look at proactivity. And I find that among these, being able to use your strengths at work and being able to see meaning and purpose in what you're doing definitely gives you a life's meaning, or is a part of it. So it's extremely important to support resilience. If you feel a sense of belonging, if you feel that you can build something with other people, and if you feel that there is a good and a purpose in what you're doing, then you're bound to feel more resilient in your personal and professional lives. And I think this is one of the most important things. And that's why, as leaders and as companies, we have come to discuss purpose a lot more, not just our company's purpose, but our personal purpose or purpose as a leader. I don't know if that helps.
Yep, great, thank you.
Yeah.
And I think there are some more questions in the chat. Sarah, do you want to take over? Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a question from Kerry saying, how can I encourage my daughter to develop resilience? She's 17.
Well, first, try avoid using catastrophic language. I think life is not terrible or terrific, but usually happens somewhere in between. And the language we use is quite important to frame how we think about life. So if you're careful in the language you use, this will invite her to think and see life more realistically. Not running to her help every time she needs it. I don't know, this is easier said than done, I think, and it's a different balance for everybody. And as somebody who only has stepchildren, it's easier for me to preach than other mothers around the table. And Ebru is looking at me like, yeah, right. But really, this is like also like delegation at work. The more you can delegate to them, the more their self-esteem will develop, and the more they will see that they will be able to solve problems on their own, then the more resilient they will be. And try to teach them different skills, because the world is changing very fast, and you need adaptability more than ever. You can check out Amin Tufani's work on adaptability quotient. He talks about how our brain can become more adaptable, and there are different ways to trigger it. You can check that out on your own, but I would say giving people various skills, from knitting to cooking to computer programming. Life. Anything else? Well, there's the issue of where does the hope and faith come from? And if you can find something together where you find hope and faith in life, to get that optimism part of the realistic optimism, then that's going to role model and help her feel hope more.
Sule, there's an interesting question. Welcome. Sorry, Sarah, I jumped in, but does a group of resilient individuals make a resilient team, or is there still more to do to build collective resilience? So it's for a sports team, or, you know, a department.
Well, if everybody around the table is resilient, You need to look at where their resilience is stronger, in which areas, and how they complement one another. Of course, it's easier than if you have a group of people who are not resilient at all, obviously. But for example, in the area of emotional control, how good are you? Who can learn what from each other? In terms of proactivity, some people are a lot more action oriented and proactive than others. Others shy away from going into action, whereas others, as I said, are much better in expressing and then controlling their emotions. Some people are naturally more optimistic and hopeful than others. I'm a born pessimist, for example. I will look for the worst possible case scenario in everything. And my husband, us being a little team here at home, make a good team because he's an eternal optimist. But if we were on our own, I'd be depressed and he'd be like dreaming on and not getting anywhere. So those aspects of resilience you can dissect and see how it's working in the team, and we have different assessments to do that.
Thank you, Sule. We have another question. And it's from Kelly. Please may I ask a general question? I coach an under-10s girls football team. Some struggle with confidence when playing, but also off the pitch. How can I encourage their resilience and confidence as players, children, from a coach's point of view?
Tough questions here today. Carol Dweck talks about a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. I think you may want to look into that a little bit. She has done a lot of work with children, and she says that some of us naturally go after a fixed mindset or a growth mindset, depending on the experiences and the circumstances. Is looking at fearing away from challenges and therefore not making much of an effort and not persevering. Whereas a growth mindset is living in the not yet moment. So it's not that you don't know. It's not that you haven't achieved. It's just that you have not done it yet. So everything then becomes more of an experiment, something that you curiously and courageously go through. Whereas with fixed mindsets, everything becomes a test of your intelligence and a test of approval. Will they like me? Will they not like me? Will I look confident? Will I look inconfident? Will I look stupid? Will I look smart? And then, of course, you become fixed in how you look at things. I don't want to talk too much about it, but it's quite interesting. They did a lot of research with children. For example, they gave children an IQ test, not an IQ test, but like a general sort of intelligence and skill test. One group of children, they said, oh, great, your scores were wonderful. You must be really smart. The other group of kids, they gave a different feedback. Great, your scores are wonderful. You must have worked really hard. And then they gave the kids a second test, which was even more challenging. The first group who got the feedback of you must be really smart were really hesitant to take the second test, and they struggled with it. And afterwards, they even lied about their results if they made lots of mistakes. Whereas the group who got affirmation of their hard work or confirmation of their hard work and praise for it, just went for it and had a good time with it and described this as a learning experience. So there may be some food for thought there, I hope, Kelly, to build self-confidence.
We have another question from Justine. I am working with a new women's football club, which has been a very big task to build during the pandemic. Everyone individually has had their struggles this year, and sometimes this can reflect in training on the pitch, as we can't have the usual social engagement a new sports team would. How can we build and maintain resilience together as a group through the season?
Thinking about this one, especially because I'm so far away from sports.
Well, have a growth mindset, right? And,
Yes, how about growth mindset?
Making you grow into sports.
Well, look, for the first time, I have started, I always work in corporate settings. And for the first time of late, I started working with university students, 18 to 25-year-olds. And I'm doing some group coaching. Social intelligence and to increase their resilience in these tough times. And they're complaining of similar things that you're talking about. They're not necessarily a sports team, but most of them are locked either at home or on campus, and they feel quite detached. And it's difficult to get the group spirit up because of that. So what I try is to build trust in the group and to open up vulnerabilities. So I try little exercises. These are obviously not very physical exercises because I do them over Zoom, but for people to share who they are with one another. So when we introduce ourselves, for example, I ask them to introduce themselves by saying their name, the meaning of their name, and why that name was given to them. It's just a very simple question, but something that most of us have not thought about or don't know about each other, the story behind your name. Or I asked them to come the week after with an object that's dear to their heart. And then there's a story there. So I would say the short answer would be try to get the stories out and get to know one another at a deeper level, which social and emotional intelligence is about. And that builds trust in a team and in a group. I hope that helps. And you can get in touch with me later, and I'd be happy to share the exercises that I do with this age group.
I think there was a suggestion on this question from Bex. Give everyone a task and sense of purpose to build a club together. Virtual events are key, and recognition of achievement, and social media can share accomplishments and ownership. Yeah, these are all great suggestions, and I love it when the conversation goes on to giving ideas and advice to each other in the chat as well. I think that has been the beauty of all these sessions. So our time is almost up, and I will wrap up thanking a lot to my dear friend Sule. Many thanks for your time today and your tips. And what we are hoping to do is also, beyond our really popular leadership courses, bring in additional shorter workshops, which are building upon these webinars, but smaller groups with more interactivity, so you can further work on building your resilience, or something about imposter syndrome, or some other ideas that we are working on. So if you're not a member, please do join Women in Football, and so that you can keep up with all the great events and activities and learning opportunities that Sarah and the team are preparing for you. And as usual, many thanks to Sarah for a wonderful organization. And we hope to see you again on another program soon. Thank you, Sule.
Thank you, Ebru. Thank you, everyone. Stay safe. And do get in touch if you want more resources or if you have questions.
We will. Thank you. Take care. Stay well.